Welcome to the Health Trip Podcast. My name is Jill Foose. I'm a functional medicine and integrative nutrition health coach. I created this podcast to bring you along as we travel down intriguing, science-packed roads, debunking old medical paradigms and perusing new innovative therapies and modalities with the finest functional medicine doctors, practitioners, and like-minded biohackers while living our best life. Enjoy the show. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Health Trip Podcast. I am officially in season 5, which is amazing. I am thrilled that you are all still here with me, learning more about menopause, the science, yourselves, as well as how to move forward and thrive during our second act in a personalized, sustainable way. Today, we're diving into a topic that sits at the center of midlife women's health, but is often misunderstood or oversimplified: the role of muscle, protein, and movement in how we age. I'm asked all the time, what should I eat? How should I move? And is it possible to change my body composition in my 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond? The answer, yes, yes, and more yes. So many women in perimenopause and beyond tell me that their bodies feel different from how they used to. Weight is shifting, energy levels are changing, and strength declines more easily. And what once worked for health and fitness doesn't always work the same for us anymore. And there's biology behind that. And understanding that biology can be incredibly empowering. We all must take an initiative to learn about our bodies, what's happening, and how we can shift our lifestyle and our mindset to support them. To help us unpack this confusing topic, I'm joined by Professor Stuart Phillips, one of the world's leading experts in skeletal muscle health, aging, nutrition, and exercise. He is a Tier 1 Canada Research Chair at McMaster University and directs the Physical Activity Center of Excellence, where his research focuses on how diet and exercise affect muscle, metabolism, and body composition, particularly as we get older. So, without further ado, let's dig in. First, a short medical disclaimer. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice or to make any lifestyle changes to treat any medical condition in yourself or others. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. And this entire disclaimer also applies to any of my guests on my podcast. So sit back, open your mind, and let's dig in. Welcome to the Health Trip Podcast, Professor Stuart Phillips. I am so excited to have you here today.
Thanks for having me on the show, Jill. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And so from here on out, we're going to be casual. I'm going to call you Stu, and we're just going to go with the flow and open up this conversation. Yeah. And where I want to start is midlife women and beyond are being bombarded with nutrition and exercise advice on the internet. And as you know, there is a lot of conflicting noise on social media, and everyone likes to use the science-backed or the evidence-based language, which only confuses women more. So I'd like to start out today with talking about what are those red flags we should look for when considering using some of this advice?
Yeah, it is confusing. I spend time on social media, which is to say that, I'm not Kim Kardashian. I don't have millions of followers, but compared to my academic colleagues, I have a lot of followers. So, from the outside of the sort of fishbowl looking in, it must be super confusing. And even, talk casual conversation with my wife and her friends, they're bewildered about what's going on. And midlife is confusing enough with everything that's happening from a menopausal transition standpoint. But I think the biggest red flags are when people come out with certainties around statements. So little of science and what we know, and particularly when it comes to exercise, is a certainty. I mean, the only certainty is if you don't exercise, you should start because it's really good for you. And then after that, the subtleties and nuances, and people really do play in, I think, margins. And it's sort of like, this is what you need to do. And actually, the truth is, when you look at that, it's like it's such a marginal difference. And there actually is no need to do it. And that's the language around necessity, which a lot of people go, "Oh my God, I'm doing exercise wrong." And I'm like, "No, you're not. Like you're out there doing it." And that's like such a big check mark as opposed to you need to do and I'm like, the biggest and I'm like, that's the type of language that actually is exclusionary and creates
Yeah.
barriers. So, if anything, I would say is that there's very little you need to do other than if you want to improve your fitness, you probably need to exercise. After that, the granular details I think matter far less.
Yeah, I would agree with you. The barriers to entry for so many women are out there, and we need to open up the gates just to help women get started. A lot of women, as a health coach, we talk about our vision and things that we want and desire for, the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And we have to have these barriers come down so that they have the capacity to just move through the gates. So I really like that explanation of red flags from you. Why do muscle, protein, and resistance training matter more as we age, especially for women?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be fair to say, like, the baseline that I always start with is to explain to people that based on self-report, probably about 20% of people self-report that they do some type of strengthening activity, and I think that yeah, I don't think it's a news flash. I think everybody sort of understands the 150 minutes of aerobic work, and
Hmm.
most people are, yeah, I get that, and I go, and 2 days of strengthening work, and they're like, yeah, and I'm like, that's actually part of the physical activity guidelines, and I think we've got the number right. I think 2 days is a perfect number to aim for. Not that one day is bad, but any day is better than 0 days. And when I say that, I mean it's the same pattern of data that taking somebody who does no activity or very little to doing something that is the big reduction in risk. And when we talk about risk, chronic disease, risk for cardiovascular disease, for cancer, for type 2 diabetes, a lot of things that are out there. Osteoporosis is a great example as well. Resistance exercise is not engaged in, anywhere near aerobic exercise. And when you say to somebody, do you do resistance exercise? Or like, "Oh, I don't like to go to the gym." And I'm like, well, you don't need to go to the gym, body weight work, this sort of thing. But I think for women, what is beginning to become mainstream talk now is the loss of muscle. So sarcopenia as the muscle equivalent of osteopenia, which is the precursor to osteoporosis. But what we don't have, we have a fracture as the main outcome of loss of bone, but we don't have the same sort of clinical endpoint for muscle. But understanding what role muscle plays in general or overall health, I think is we're beginning to get a sense of that. And I point out that at some point, somebody's physical activity, even in a given day, like getting up and out of a chair, getting in and out of a car, going up and down stairs, is going to depend on strength and power, and not necessarily aerobic fitness. Which is great. You should have both. But most people have no sense of, your muscle begins to decline and your strength begins to decline. For most people, I know this is going to hurt, but probably in around their 30s. And
Yeah.
when you look at it from that standpoint, the investment very similar to building up peak bone mass and going through the menopausal transition with a higher bone mass and density than somebody else is that building up that muscle reserve in midlife it's critical to aging well basically and it's an investment that pays dividends. It's sort of, it's compounding interest, in other words, that muscle is probably as big a deal as bone. And we're just, it's about getting the message out, right? And,
Yeah.
helping teach people how important it is.
Yeah. So I have osteoporosis. Well, I was
Mhm.
diagnosed with osteoporosis a year and a half ago. I just went for another DEXA, and actually now I have osteopenia. So I
Okay.
shifted some things in my lifestyle
Right.
and increased my calcium intake, and I was able to bring that back down So my
Yeah.
mom has osteoporosis. And
Yep.
so I've been on this journey for 40 plus years in the gym. I'm
Yeah.
actually one of those women who really enjoys, and I find a lot of joy in lifting. That is my jam is lifting. And I lift heavy.
That's
Okay.
awesome.
So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Cardio is a little bit more difficult for me, but um
Hmm.
even if we're on this journey of lifting and exercising and honing in on our nutrition, which we're going to also talk about,
Sure.
genetics play a role.
They do.
And I always say, when you're at your Thanksgiving table, look around the table. Who
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
has an aid? Who can't get up
Yeah.
from their
Yeah.
chair and make it to the couch on their own without somebody, holding under their shoulder or their arm or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
right? Those are your family genetics. That's your family history. And to
Yeah.
me, that's just a reminder of, oh, okay, I need to do X, Y, and Z because I don't want that for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the phrase is, genetics sort of, is the blueprint or the sheet music, then, it's how you play it, right? So, lifestyle can definitely change your fate. As you mentioned, you've been able to push back the osteoporotic to osteopenic diagnosis. So you can do things that probably your grandmother or that your mother didn't do to change where it is you are.
Yeah.
But family history and genes do play a role. So it's not that, a fait accompli, like this is gonna happen. But with osteoporosis, with loss of muscle, with loss of mobility, when you look back, your grandmother probably didn't have a role model for weightlifting, and your mom probably had, looked at Jane Fonda and said
Right.
it was slim or skinny and aerobics, right? And Ken
Yeah.
Cooper, as the founder of the term, once poo-pooed muscle as a non-essential sort of piece of aging. He's changed his tune, which I'm pleased to hear. But men had, Arnold Schwarzenegger. They had Sylvester Stallone as like, that guy looks good, but muscle and lifting, that's okay. That's a manly pursuit. So I think women need to come around to the idea that there's nothing unfeminine or unwomanly or anything about lifting weights and being strong. In fact, I think it's becoming more of a feminine ideal. And when
Hmm.
I take a look at our student gym, I see a lot more women that are lifting and than has ever been. Part of that, and you can love it or hate it, has been normalized by things like CrossFit and High Rocks and getting into
Hmm.
those types of sports. And I know I'm not the biggest fan of those, but they have really taken off this sort of, it's not this isn't a man's pursuit. This is a woman's pursuit. And in fact, it's probably a de rigueur of aging well.
Yeah. Yeah. We hear a lot of terms such as skeletal muscle mass, lean mass, muscle
Yeah.
hypertrophy. I mean, most of us do not know what these all mean. And so
Yeah.
when we're on social media and we're hearing these things alongside this advice that we must do, that we need to do, it becomes so overwhelming, again, presenting a barrier to entry. So can you just sort of explain what all of these mean and how or why they matter to women, why we need to know about this?
Yeah, so when you're a kid and you're growing, not just in height and and everything,
Hmm.
but your muscle is going up as well. So, growth, let's say it stops somewhere around 18 to 20 for most people. After that, as I said, you maintain your muscle mass till probably somewhere in your 30s, and then it's slowly declining. Um, if you're able to change muscle in terms of its cross-sectional area, so if you look and imagine cutting through your bicep and you can make your bicep bigger, and that's what happens when you lift weights, that process is known as hypertrophy. It's effectively muscle fibers getting bigger, and then individual fibers, the muscle gets bigger. Um, Lean mass is the term given to everything in your body that isn't either fat or bone. And most
Mm,
people say, and so that's muscle. I'm like, muscle is in there, but it's not everything. In fact, clearly you've got organs and I mean, there's water in there as well, that can make the term, people say muscle mass and confuse it with lean mass all the time. they're not the same. One is a reasonable proxy of the other. In other words, lean mass is a reasonable proxy of muscle. But if you measure muscle mass, you need some pretty sophisticated methods, and it's rarely done, to be honest with you. In research, we do it probably more, but even then, it's not done very often. So I think it's important to be careful using precise language. And when people say lean mass went up, so that's muscle, and I'm like, it is part of it, but not all of it. So the language matters. Probably it's a subtlety that you should be aware of. But if it says lean mass, just remember, I think the key takeaway is that's not always all muscle.
Okay, that's really important. And so if someone's going to get a DEXA scan with body composition included, or they're
Yeah,
getting an in-body, um,
yeah, yeah.
both of those, yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
a DEXA scan, the machine, the DEXA, the dual energy X-ray
Mhm.
absorptiometry machine, is made to measure bone.
Right.
That's its primary function, and it does a great job at that. In fact, if nothing else, that's the takeaway. And obviously, in your case, you're getting the DEXA scan
Mhm.
because of your osteoporotic diagnosis, and that's completely legitimate. What it also gives you is a fat compartment, and it's pretty good at that. And then it gives you fat and bone-free lean mass. And everybody goes, that's muscle. I'm like, in part. And so, just to be aware of that, when you go and you do an in-body scan, in-body scanners are made, the algorithms inside them from DEXA. Uh, so it's using again the proxy of the DEXA scanner, and it measures hydration status, which is basically body water and fluid, to calculate and estimate skeletal muscle. But rest assured, it's an estimate. Um, Sometimes it can be pretty good. It's pretty good at tracking changes in skeletal muscle, but it's not overly precise. So in a research lab, we have a DEXA scanner, we have an in-body scanner, and we have some other methods as well that we put them all together to create a sort of more comprehensive picture of body composition. So, I think the walkaway message is everything is using a bit of an algorithm and a proxy to sort of, I won't say guess, but give you the best estimate possible. Some of them are reasonably good. Some of them are a little bit less precise, and so you can take trends upwards or downwards with a grain of salt. But I think for the most part is an absolute number. I'd be a little less, put a little less stock in that.
Okay, that's really good information to know. Um, I want to shift just to the menopause transition for just a minute here. Earlier, you said that aging, starting in our 30s, women are going to lose some of our muscle mass.
I know, I know. And
And
I'm so far north of my 30s that,
I
it's,
think I'm
so
even
let's,
further north than you.
yeah, yeah. So let's just say that, I'm a male, but I haven't got, but I'm on the downslope. So,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So, because it's really interesting because there are many influencers out there, including physicians, who talk about the menopause transition as being one of the causes of women losing their muscle mass. But
yeah,
I've heard you say, no, it's really about aging because it happens for
yeah,
men as well.
yes. Yeah, I mean, I think there's an important distinction to make. From your 30s, men and women, the trajectory downwards on a population level, the lines are parallel. Obviously, women start out with lower muscle mass, but men and women follow the same sort of decline. Now, on a population level, 95% of women, their menstrual cycle between ages 45 and 55 disappears. So
Mhm.
that's the perimenopausal transition. So 1 year absent a menstrual period, you're postmenopausal. And at that point, you would expect on a population level to see the curve inflect it downwards. If estrogen were the causative agent and its lack in terms of muscle mass or lean mass, and you don't. There's no precipitous loss of muscle during that 10-year period uh, in anybody. Now, that's different than bone is a very estrogen responsive tissue, and its density and mass go down, and you can see
Mhm.
that sort of, so there's the tissue that it's very, very clear and very apparent. And a lot of women say, but my muscle has gone down or my fat has definitely gone up. And I'm like,
Mhm.
so let's talk about, everything else that's going on during that transition. I'm like, how's your sleep? They're like, it's terrible. And I'm like, so if I, absent the change in estrogen, just poked you every 4 hours, turned on the center in your brain that says I'm on fire, gave you brain fog, so your ability to make, good decisions around nutrition, exercise, let alone your career, your kids, and everything else you have going on is greatly reduced. And so people's activity levels change, people's dietary processes change. And I would never argue that, the ability to, predisposition towards fat gain goes up, because we do know that that happens, but it doesn't flick the switch to muscle loss. And I think you have to separate, that 45 to 55 is a decade of normal aging. And so you would expect to lose, around 7 to 8% of your muscle in that decade anyway. And compounded with decisions around or inability to make good decisions about your health and everything else that's going on. I think that those are the culprits more than estrogen's lack of stimulation of muscle, which is like there's no good data to show that that's true. And so, I really I would love to be able to say, there's a switch that you can flick, or giving women back menopausal hormone therapy could revert muscle loss. It doesn't. It lets you gain greater control of your life through management of
Mhm.
symptoms. And I understand that is I'll call it a secondary gateway to making better decisions. And I'm not going to deny that. But it's an interesting hypothesis too, because that's how I view it. Is women say, but I was able to get, and I was like, and isn't that awesome that if that does affect women's intention to exercise, that would be great. I said, and
Mhm.
they go, yeah. And I'm like, but we don't have that data. We'd love to have that data. And I think it would be a great clinical trial to run to say, getting MHT allows women to make better decisions. And, I I watch my wife go through it. If men went through this, there would be a global task force. We'd have
Right.
this solved by lunchtime, right? Because
Right.
I don't think most men could handle it, frankly.
Mhm.
And women have been told for so long, well, just put up with it, So, yep, hopefully those days are over, and we can move on. But I would love to tell you that, estrogen is the switch that gets flicked. Honestly, no good data support that hypothesis.
I am really glad to hear you clarify this for all of us. It's a really important message because there is no magic pill. In fact, there's a lot of talk now about testosterone. I've been using
Yeah,
testosterone for
yeah,
25 years,
yeah, yeah,
for a
yeah.
very long time. And I can tell you that taking testosterone does not help you wake up in the morning and look like Popeye's wife. You still have to do the work. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I think it can
yeah.
be disappointing if women go into saying, okay,
Yeah,
I'm going to take MHT, including
yeah,
testosterone, and
sure.
all's going to be well. I don't have to work as hard. Um,
Yeah, that's not true.
right.
I mean, I,
And,
I think, the one person I follow for testosterone advice is Professor Susan Davis. And,
yes.
she said repeatedly is that there's lots of things that can happen with testosterone that are beneficial. And lots of women, your life comes back to you
Yeah.
and everything. But the reversal of muscle loss is not one of them. Lots of women will swear by it. And I'm like, not, taking away from anybody's lived experience, but without data, we can't say that. But yeah, certainly. Look, let's call a spade and say menopausal hormone therapy from a symptom alleviation standpoint and everything else, and vasomotor symptoms primarily, works. There's no question. That's the indication for it. Testosterone is not a magic unlock. And for some women, estrogen and every progesterone and various combinations are also not the magic unlock. So, I think that everybody's got an individual biology and a journey that's probably different, which is probably,
Yeah.
very, very frustrating. But yeah, again, I wish I could say, oh yeah, testosterone is the answer. For some people, it is, but it's certainly not the answer.
Yep. Yeah. So before we move on to protein, which I know is your jam, I just
Sure.
want to kind of round out this exercise and resistance training and cardio. So for a woman who's, my age, she's in her 50s,
Yeah.
and she's already been on a journey of exercising, because I get asked this all the time, what is the ideal
Right.
exercise routine for someone like that? Because that's different than someone who is not doing any resistance training, which we can address
Yes.
as well. And you
Yes.
recently published a study, which I found really interesting, about heavy lifting with lower reps versus lighter weights with higher reps, and that
Yeah.
they both stimulated muscle growth.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So the quick answer to, everybody goes, what's the best exercise? The answer is always, I'm like, what's the exercise you can do or you like to do? And they're like, I like to blank. And I'm like, and consistently you can do that? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, that's the best exercise right there. And I'm like, and usually it's walking, biking, running, hiking, swimming, jogging. And I'm like, you do any strengthening work? They go, I don't really like weights or going to the gym. I'm like, okay, what about if you did something at home and it doesn't have to be super heavy sort of stuff? And they're like, yeah, I could probably do that. And I'm like, well, there's lots of different routines using resistance bands,
Mhm.
and it used to be just TheraBands that you had to hold. And TheraBands are awesome, but we've now got tubes that have handles on them. And,
Yeah.
and people are like, well, what can I do with those? I'm like, there are about 1,001 free videos on YouTube showing you
Yeah.
how to work out with these devices. Well, do they really do anything? And the answer is yes, they do. And once again, to come back to from nothing to something, big reduction in risk, improvement in function, and everything else. And I get it. If you like to lift heavy weights, I'm not saying don't. Fill your boots, like have at it. You're preaching to the converted. I get it. Um, is it better? It depends on what your goal is. We'd like to say for bone it's better, but lots of things work for bone. The same vein, lots of things work for muscles. So lighter, and I'm not talking about, doing curls with your phone or something, but
Right.
something that in about sort of 20 to 25 repetitions, not necessarily 3 to 4. So the heavy end of things creates fatigue in your muscles that you're like, I'm at about an 8 or 9 out of 10. It works. It makes you stronger. Your muscle, goes up. We've got the same work as what you're referring to in terms of that study going in women right now. I don't expect for women to be different. Always stand to be proven wrong, but maybe in about a year's time, have me back and I'll let you know how it goes. We've also got
Mhm.
it. I think I told you just before the show, big study going in perimenopausal women as well, and we'll test the same paradigm in these folks as well. And I genuinely expect that heavier and lighter weights are going to end up producing the same types of outcomes. It's the lifting of something that is the big deal. So yeah, worry less about the fine tune and more about the doing of.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. It takes down the gate to women entering into a gym or creating a home gym. Ever since the pandemic, a lot of people have created a home gym for themselves.
Yeah,
And now it's just
yeah,
finding their reasons for change, their reasons for going into the basement or into that room to do the
yeah,
work, which can be,
yep,
another challenge as well. I
yep.
have an 85-year-old mom who lives completely independent. I mean, she is so badass. She
Awesome,
does
amazing.
her weights multiple times a week. And we're going to talk about protein next, she eats her protein. I mean,
Yeah,
when I look at her, I think, okay, that is my vision. I want
yeah.
to,
There's your aging model, right? That's perfect. Yeah,
100%. And she
yeah,
has a great grandson now. So we
Yeah.
all just had our first baby in the family, and
Amazing.
finding your reasons for change, finding that vision.
Yeah.
It's so important for women during this second act of our life to reconnect with those reasons for, because we, like you said, we have so much on our plate. We have all these physiological changes going on. We're caring for our elderly. We might have kids who don't have a job yet and they're out of college, so they're at home. We
Got a
might
few
have,
of those.
yeah, right. We might have career changes. And what else is
Yeah.
happening to women during this time? Divorce. Over
Yeah.
50% of
Yeah.
us are getting
Yeah.
divorced.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, there's lots of
It's a
reasons,
lot. You got a lot
a
going on.
lot.
I mean, I think the, and again, having a very overachieving wife who, I'll just mention is my boss's boss here at the university.
Ah,
So I occupy a relatively senior position, so I won't tell you where she's at, but she's way above my pay grade.
that's
Um,
great.
how do you balance all of that and trying to,
Yeah.
break that glass ceiling and knock down the barriers, which, you can say what you want, but as an academic, and she is too, were far greater for her than they were for me. So, being frank, yeah, it's, you're juggling a lot. So I completely understand it. And so the simplification of, what should be, and I love that you called it the second act. I mean, it really is, right? It's almost as if you spend your life and then it's like, okay, finally, like let's get on with things. And you got a lot of life left to live, and a lot of productivity, and you know, exercise shouldn't be the thing that you worry about. The doing of it, yes. The you need to do this, and I'm like that's just not true. That's something that we've got to cut that language, or shaming people for doing a form of like, how is walking exercise? I'm like, and just yesterday the British Medical Journal published an amazing, and the most consistent signal was about a 20% reduction in all-cause mortality, and walking was most consistent. Like the signal was so clear. And I'm like, how can you talk? How can you badmouth walking? So yeah,
I mean, walking just checks off so many things for
does.
us in a positive way. I mean, there's
Yeah.
just mindfulness if you go for a walk and
Oh,
clear your mind, or just,
yeah. Yeah.
meditative walking, walking with a partner and
Yeah.
having that relationship connection.
A
Um,
little chat. Yeah. Connect with green space. Yeah, it's
yeah,
yeah, astonishingly good for you. And so I'm if I'm really down on anything on social media, it's people who poo-poo any form of exercise, period. But certain like and the shame that, well, you need to put those weights down and do this. And I'm like, but who lifted the original weights, and who did that work, and who went for that walk? I mean, so yeah, I think we're preaching to the converted, but
yeah.
all good.
But just to recap on this about exercise, what's really going to move the dial in terms of, if your vision is longevity, if your vision is living an independent life where you have strength, where you have power, where you have
Yeah.
endurance, where you can go to the farmer's market and carry back 2 bags of groceries, go up a flight of stairs,
Yeah.
resistance training has to be part of the equation.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, like I said, it's a de rigueur part of aging well. I think we've nailed 150 minutes. I think that's unequivocal. There's great evidence, all kinds of stuff. We're a little bit behind on the resistance training sort of dose response, but everything that we have to date suggests that the 2 days a week of strengthening work, and everybody says, how long do the sessions have to be? And I'm like, how's 30 minutes? They're like, Okay, I could maybe do that." And I'm like, literally, 2 days a week, 30 minutes at a shot. And I always use the analogy of like squeezing the cloth, right? And I'm like, here's the cloth full of water, and the water is the benefit. And you're not lifting weights. I said it's all just sitting there. And I'm like, this is 1 day a week. This is 2 days a week.
Mm,
And then, after that, you're like, this is three, this is four, and now the cloth's twist, and the water that's coming out is so small. Like, and everybody goes, "But I like to lift 5 days a week." I'm like, have at it. Like, fill your boots, It's not bad. It's just that, for most people, if time and effort and energy, et cetera, are the barrier, and
yeah,
everything else, like you mentioned, you've
yeah.
got hockey kids and everything. So if you're busing kids to soccer or hockey and doing all this sort of stuff, how do you find time to do this? Well, half an hour twice a week. I'm like, not bad. Maybe I can squeeze that in. Maybe I can find time for me to put something in my health bank that ultimately, as you said, is going to pay dividends. You're going to be able to carry those two bags. You're going to be able to get in and out of a car. And to your mom's lesson at 85, if you're living by yourself as a woman, that's a sign of so much health and longevity success. It's a big deal.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. I want to switch over to protein because I know that's,
Yeah.
something that you are just a shining star on. Um, the 2025 dietary guidelines just dropped. Big shift,
Yes.
right? They flipped the
Yes.
pyramid, putting high quality
Yeah.
protein right at the top
Yeah.
and increase the recommendation from zero point 0.8 grams of protein per kilo of body weight to
Yeah.
1.2. And I think I've heard you say you really like that 1.2 to 1.6.
Yeah.
So being in the United States, we go by like grams per pound. I think that's a lot easier for the women that I work with.
Sure.
So if you
Sure.
can sort of shift for us, tell us
Yep.
about protein, why midlife women might need more, and all the nuance around that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, so the leader statement is always that the exercise and lifting weights bakes the cake. The cake gets the icing, and who doesn't like a bit of icing, and the extra benefit, but physiologically from a standpoint of protein forms not just your muscles, but part of your bone, your skin, your teeth, everything. Uh, that you probably need to eat a little more than the RDA. The RDA, the recommended dietary allowance of zero point 0.8 grams per kilo, as you mentioned, or 0.35 grams per pound, was a level of protein that was designed to prevent deficiency in about 98% of people. The methods used to design it were imperfect. I think we've improved on them since they came out. And I say came out, like this is about a 60-year-old sort of endeavor. And as you said, the guidelines recognize that, and the recommendations of 1.2 to 1.6 are more in line with optimization of health on a lot of fronts, but definitely from an aging standpoint, definitely from managing your metabolic health. In my view, not everybody agrees, and so let's be fair about that. But I do think that it requires maybe a little bit more concerted effort to get up from 0.35 to say zero point 0.7, which is 1.6, so double the RDA. That requires you to think about it's a little bit more of a protein-centric way of thinking. And the biggest meal that most people miss their protein at is breakfast.
Mhm.
And because it's traditionally a very carbohydrate-centric meal. Not that that's bad. Whole grains are awesome. But my go-to in sort of saying to people to get more protein in has been, Greek style yogurt. Yogurt, superfood anyway, fermented dairy, astonishingly good benefits. And you've got calcium. It's fortified with vitamin D. It's got a lot of potassium, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and even a small, like a 3/4 of a cup to a cup is going to give you about 20 grams of protein. And that's probably for a lot of women, uh, you know, probably 16 to 17 grams more than they're getting if they're just eating a slice of toast,
Mhm.
or a bagel or something like that. And, no hack against there are no bad foods, just repeatedly doing it. There are some bad diets, but that morning meal is the Kickstarter for, getting protein metabolism going. And I think that that's a pretty big deal for a lot of folks. Um, I don't know that the needs change through menopause, but I do think that a lot of women are on the lower end of the protein consumption. A lot of focus on the slimness aspect of, I need to keep my weight and everything down. And so I'm going to cut this out. And so I'm going to stay away from protein. And the truth is that, protein is not a great nutrient that you can turn into fat. I know a lot of people say if you overeat it, you're going to turn it into fat. And the truth is, actually, you don't. it's really difficult to make fat from protein. It's got a pretty good satiety value. In other words, you feel full and satisfied. And I just think that the guidelines, we can talk about lots of other aspects that people say they didn't get right, but they pretty much nailed the protein issue in my mind.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I working with women, one of the exercises we do together is track protein for a week or two. And I don't mean every
Mm.
day. I mean
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
2 times a week, just
Yeah,
track your protein, nothing else. Don't worry about anything else. And it's pretty eye-opening for them. They come up with somewhere between 40 and 60 grams of protein a day, and
yeah,
they're eating more processed foods at night because they're hungry and that's easy to grab. They don't have to cook anything. So
yeah.
I really like that you said there's a satiety component to getting your protein at an ideal level for you. Um, and also we're talking about exercising, and eating more protein isn't also going to make you wake up and have muscles the next day. But tell us about the
No.
relationship between increasing your protein if your goal is to change your body composition and you're in the gym.
Yeah. So you said there's a lot to unpack there, but I think, and again, a lot of this is about removing barriers or even stigma or whatever you want to call it around what weightlifting can do for women. And,
Mhm.
hand on heart, we've been doing this for 30 years. We have done work in women, not as much, admittedly, as we have in men, which is the thing we're trying to rectify. We've got 3 studies on the go, and it's just women working out, lifting weights. It's awesome. Um, but I've yet to see a woman bulk up,
Yeah,
to use that word, if to sort of get this physique. And some women have said, like, I don't want to look like this, and they point to a woman who's clearly getting some exogenous help. And I said, I can promise you, if you begin to look like that, we will change something in your program. But there are some women, just like there are some men, who are genetically gifted and they gain muscle fairly quickly. They don't look muscular, but they see the change in their body, and the recomposition that you spoke of, which can be underpinned by, more protein, is that it's muscle at the expense of fat. And so the report back to us is, things like my clothes fit differently. I can see the change when I look in the mirror and how the shape of my body, and nobody has been unsatisfied with that. And I think that that's a little bit of a change in maybe what the ideal feminine physique is. It's different. It's okay to be athletic. It's okay to have a sort of I won't say a muscular build, but an athletic physique. And
absolutely.
yeah, and it's not unwomanly, and again, it's a matter of perspective. We now have 33,000 students here on campus, and we have a very diverse, very ethnically and culturally diverse student population. And we've begun to get interest from various different groups of women that they come in usually together, and to talk about, I like, my mother would not let me do this study. And I have to chuckle a little bit, and I'm like, why is that? She said, well, it's not it's not ideal for women to have muscles and be strong. And
Mm.
I'm like, well, I beg to differ, but there's a generational shift in how they view what it is to be a woman, I think, and to be physically strong. But the shift from having a little bit more muscle and a little bit less fat, it's not a radical change, but I think most of the women that in the studies that we've been doing are very, very pleased to see that happen. And around the midlife transition, and we've got this big perimenopausal cohort about to go through, I suspect that we're going to see the same thing. So once again, bring me back about a year, and I could tell you all about it. But all of the benefits, like from a metabolic health standpoint, longevity, bone, muscle is enjoying a heyday, and rightfully so. Before it was just bulk. It was stuff you carried around and allowed you to be, physically active, but it's much, much more than that. So
And protein and getting that number ideal for you is really important. And I'd also like to add in terms of increasing protein for women, is that other things that we're going through is, which has been my story, is hair loss. I've been on a hair loss to hair growth journey for over
yeah,
30 years from losing half of my thyroid and then going through perimenopause or childbirth before that, all the things, right? And so we need protein to help grow our hair. Our hair is protein. Also,
yeah,
skin
it's yeah,
changes for
right.
women, right?
Yeah.
A lot of women complain that they're having these skin texture changes or
Mhm.
more wrinkles, loss of collagen. We need to eat more protein so that we can support these other cosmetic goals that we might have. Not everybody has those goals, but I certainly
Mhm.
do. Um,
Yeah,
a couple questions about protein.
yeah,
One is
yep,
we hear about muscle protein synthesis and that we have to eat
yes,
25 to 30 grams of protein at a time to get
yeah.
that switch turned on. And so, explain what muscle protein synthesis is for women who might not know what that is, and why there's a number to it, and if that really is something that matters.
Yeah. Protein is made up of building blocks, and there are 20 of them. They're called amino acids. Nine of those blocks are what we call essential amino acids, and they're essential because we need to eat them. We can't make them. The other 11 we can make. So the protein that we eat, and whether it comes from animals or plants, and your body doesn't really know the difference between those two. Like it doesn't, oh, this is an amino acid from a plant, this is amino acid from an animal. Um, Takes those proteins, it breaks them all down into those individual blocks, and they enter our bloodstream and they go to tissues, and they're effectively, I always say to people, imagine that your muscle or any other protein tissue, like your skin, is like a brick wall. And the bricks are the amino acids, and we're building the wall and we're making muscle and we're making new skin. And at the same time, there's another crew that's pulling the bricks out of the wall because they're a little bit damaged. And, there's another team sort of putting bricks in. The bricks going into the wall in muscle, that's muscle protein synthesis. The bricks coming out of the wall, that's muscle protein breakdown. So you can imagine when those two processes are balanced, our muscle mass doesn't really change. If we shift synthesis up and break down in the negative direction, we're going to gain muscle mass and vice versa. In your 30s, we have this gradual shift where, breakdown outpaces synthesis, not by a lot, but over time, that's why we lose muscle. When you lift weights, you reverse that in the opposite direction, and you can't stop it because age is going to win, but you can age like this, or you can age like this, right? No
Mm-hmm.
weightlifting, pretty
Mm-hmm.
simple. So muscle protein synthesis is the process of putting new bricks into the wall. And it really is what we call the locus of control. And in other words, we try and focus on that process because it's much more amenable to exercise, nutrition, hormonal stimulation, you name it. So it's the important process. Do you need 20 to 25 grams? So it's a dose response mechanism. And so when you go from 0 to 5 to 10 to 20 to 25 and 30, it's at the top of the curve. In other words, you can't push muscle protein synthesis higher and higher and higher. If you did, the more protein that you ate, you would just get bigger and bigger muscles. And it's not how it works. So I think that the 25 to 30 grams is probably the top end of the curve. And so it's the optimal dose, if you wanted to call it that. It doesn't mean that if you eat 10, that it's bad. It's just on this part of the curve, but it's still, on the steep part of the curve. And I think a lot of people are, is this optimization, or is this, we spoke about it before the show, for mere mortals? And just remember what I said, going to the gym, lifting the weights, that's baking the cake. The protein is the icing on the top. And so constantly stressing about X grams of protein or X grams of leucine is, to me, that's the fine tune volume knob where it's like you're going to the gym, there's the gross volume knob. And then it's like, okay, the finer sort of aspects of things happen with the protein. So I tend to, try and I've changed my tune on this, and I know that upsets a lot of people, but that's how science works, right? You learn new things.
Mm-hmm.
As my dad would say, what good is a mind if you can't change it?
Mm-hmm.
And I worry a lot less about the per meal serving protein than I used to. Let's put it that way.
So that was my next question, the protein timing, right? So what I'm gathering from you is it's not as important
Yeah.
for per meal, like 30 grams per meal, 30 grams plus per meal to
Yeah.
hit that muscle protein synthesis, but more throughout the day to hit that ideal goal
Yeah,
for yourself.
it's the 24-hour period, and getting the 1.2 to 1.6 is the really big picture
Okay.
target that you'd like to hit. The per meal serve and everything, I think, yeah, kind of important. You asked me 20 years ago, I'd have been that's hugely important, super important. Now, not so much. So, and we spoke about this, and social media pitches messages that are oftentimes, this is the big picture, and then it's like you must get 25 grams per meal or it is a waste. And I've heard very influential and very smart people say that. And I'm like,
Hmm.
that's wrong. Like it's categorically wrong. Yeah, like you should feel embarrassed that you said that. That's how wrong it is. But those messages become the big picture when in fact it's so far out of the big, are you going to the gym? Yes. Are you doing it consistently? I'm like, great big marker, check box. Eating
Right, right.
protein, I'm like, yep, gets a big check. But in the day, the per meal stuff, the timing, the composition of the protein, I'm like, yeah, moving towards the margins and worrying less about that, unless you're concerned about that last 2 to 3%. And if you are, good for you. Dial all that stuff in because that's the optimization angle.
Yes. And that's really it's all really interesting to me because 20 years ago I used to work out at a Poliquin gym in the Chicagoland area. And
Oh,
of course, you know who
sure.
Charles
Yeah,
Poliquin is.
I do. He's Canadian.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
right, right. So, and he always had the trainers make us our protein shakes as soon as our workout was over. And so that
Yeah.
is something that's been a habit of mine for 20
Yeah.
plus years. So I
Nope.
do
I'm right
that.
there with you. I'm right there with you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I also, so a couple things. One is I wanted to touch on protein powder before we finished.
Sure.
And then I also wanted to touch on, if someone is making that protein shake after their workout and that's their healthy habit and they're using a high quality protein powder and they're getting
Yeah.
in, the 30, 40 plus grams, whatever it is that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
makes them feel good, which is,
Sure.
like myself,
Yeah.
great, but it's not
Yeah.
necessary. If you couldn't
Right.
get your protein in right after your workout, you can wait 4 hours, 6 hours, right? What if,
Sure.
if your schedule doesn't allow for that?
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Yeah, no, no. Again, I think it's a little bit of, there's no shame along with the, like you said, I think we grew up in the same gym or,
Hmm.
probably went to, same sort of doctrine. And I'm very much like you. So I have my protein shake after I work out and I like having my protein
Yeah.
shake, but I like eating like a big breakfast and eating yogurt. I'm a
Yep.
morning workout person. Um, if that's the thing that makes you feel dialed in and you feel good about it and everything, and it's not that it's ineffective, it's just that it's not, as we said before, needed. Now if you're doing it and you're doing it on a regular basis, you're probably literally turning that dial up and you're squeezing the last part out of that cloth,
Hmm.
and who could argue with that as an approach? So again, the shaming of that activity. But people, well, that's not needed, and I'm like, that's right, it's not needed, but that's where it ends, right? It's not that it's unproductive or for a lot of women, as you said, they underconsume protein and or they work out in the morning because that's when they can,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and they skip breakfast and they're
Yep.
not eating until they eat lunch, and then they eat a salad because they're trying to, the slimness, thinness thing is a big deal. And I'm like, you could probably get much more benefit from a protein meal and a few, calories, but and get the satiety so that, as you say, later at night, it's not a binge on you
Right.
know, chips or cookies or something, which is the ultra processed. If there's a true enemy in the food space,
Mm-hmm.
enemy in inverted commas, but it's ultra processed foods.
Yeah, the other thing I love about protein powder is one, it's convenient. I am a food
Yep.
first person and I am a
Yeah.
foodie, right? I love
Yeah.
eating food. But I do see a convenience factor, especially for my clients who are on a GLP-1 and working with their physician.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it's easier to drink that protein than it is to sit down and even eat a lean piece of fish or chicken or
Yeah.
tofu or something like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, food first, but I do think there is a place for protein shakes, well made,
Yep.
with intention, if that's something you need in your life.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I'm a food first person all the time. Lots of
Yeah.
other things in food that you need, nutrients,
Yep.
etc. But if you're just looking for those calories and you need the protein, people on GLP-1s, greater needs for protein due to try and protect lean mass and muscle. All of those things, box checked,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Stu, it's been just an honor to have you here.
My
You
pleasure.
are a very, very busy man, and I so appreciate your time coming to the Health Trip podcast. One last question. What gives you hope about the future of women's health science?
The conversation started.
Mm,
I think women are, well, they're fed up. They're tired of accepting, no, you can't do this. You just got it out, which one physician told my wife, a woman no less, this is just something you've got to gut out, honey, and so it's time. It's time to turn back a lot of wrongs that have been done, and women look for answers. I think that's
yeah.
amazing. I think it's a journey, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, I think next on the list for me is really welcoming in men into the menopause conversation. That's a goal of mine this year.
I'm an
You're
ally.
doing,
I'm an
yeah,
ally.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
zero lived experience, but definitely worthy of study. And we're trying to redress
Yeah,
an imbalance in, a lot of men that populated the studies that we've done for a lot of years. So stick with us. Definitely an ally. Yeah. Hopefully we can
yeah.
help a little bit.
So where can people find you or follow your work? I know you're very active on Instagram.
Yeah, yeah, mostly Instagram these days. I struggle with X for a lot of reasons, mostly
Me
political, I'll be
too.
honest. Yeah, fair
Hmm.
enough. I'm McMaster Kinesiology Professor, so it's MACKINPROF on Instagram. Same handle on X. I'm on LinkedIn as
Hmm.
Stuart Phillips, and you can find me on Facebook as SMPPH.D.
All right, I'll list all that in our show notes. And I
All
hope you'll
right.
come back and share with us the findings of your perimenopausal study when
Oh
you're
yeah,
ready.
no, I'd be more than happy. I think it's we're looking forward to that, and we can tell, given the enthusiasm of the folks that are coming to volunteer for the trials, that a lot of people are excited too. So I'd love to share that with you for sure.
Well, thank you so much again for your time and for being here. And everyone, thank you for tuning in. Until next time. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Lifestyle changes can be hard and overwhelming to make. By building your support team of functional medicine doctors, therapists, and health coaches, you can reach your optimal health goals. Be sure to check out my other podcasts. Until we meet again, stay healthy.